Docket number 4258677. People versus Franklin Bedford. Felony murder in the first degree.
How does your client plead, Mr. Vance?
Innocent, Your Honor.
Your Honor, the people request bail in the amount of $500,000.
That's excessive. My client is a juvenile.
So was the victim. Franklin Bedford shot him in cold blood and then returned to desecrate the body. Under the circumstances, $500,000 is warranted.
Last year, I had a young man disappear to Europe after making bail on a drunk driving charge. I'd like to see Franklin stick around. $500,000.
Fine. I'll cut you a check. You bastards aren't gonna take him from me.
Mr. Bedford.
Ha! This is... You can't find Harrison's killer, and now you want to haul Franklin off on trumped-up charges. Well, we're gonna beat you. Don't you worry, son. We're gonna win this thing.
Mr. Bedford, you are out of order.
The gun must be ruled inadmissible.
The gun is the critical piece of evidence in the case, Your Honor.
Illegal search and seizure. It was obtained without a warrant.
The police were within their rights. New Jersey versus TLO established that school administrators can search students' lockers given reasonable cause for suspicion. The circumstances of the crime naturally threw suspicion on the accused.
And the locker was in fact opened by an administrator.
By the headmistress, yes.
Then I'm dismissing the motion to suppress.
Mr. Bedford, is your son capable of murder?
Of course not. Why, Franklin helped to organize the Youth Anti-Violence March in the park last fall.
Objection. Irrelevant. The defendant's opposition to violence in the abstract can't be taken as evidence against his propensity for actual violence.
Sustained. Please strike that from the record.
Tag Vanderhook was shot at 6 a.m. May 6th.
At which time Franklin was home.
You can swear to this?
With pleasure. Now, let's be honest. This trial is a farce. My son has been targeted because he's a Bedford. Certain factions in this city want to see us cut down to size.
Objection. The defendant is speculating about the people's motives. We intend to prove this case on the evidence.
Objection sustained. You're not doing yourself any favors, Mr. Bedford.
Tell us about your interactions with your son on the morning of the 6th.
I woke up about a 5:15 to the sound of his golf swing. And that happens every morning in season. He likes to practice in the yard at sunrise. We had breakfast together half an hour later, as usual, and after that, I dropped him off at school.
You drove him personally?
Yes, as a matter of fact. Usually he rides with Allison, but she took the bus that day.
Your witness, Mr. McCoy.
Mr. Bedford, are you aware that perjury is a federal offense?
I stand by my testimony.
All of it? You testified that Franklin's golf practice woke you up.
Yes, he's very committed to improving his drive. I fully support him in his ambition, but unfortunately, the backyard borders my bedroom.
Your son must be very committed, considering it was pouring rain on the morning of the murder.
He may have been practicing in the study. I don't recall.
Practicing his drive in the study. I hope you don't have any Tiffany lamps in there. You two had breakfast together.
As we do every morning.
Allison Conway said she never saw Franklin that morning.
Well, of course she wouldn't. As a rule, Allison stays in her room with the baby till it's time for her to go to school.
Allison told us she had been down to the kitchen that morning.
What can I say? The two of them just missed each other.
You personally drove Franklin to school?
In the Mercedes, yes. Allison was delayed by the baby that morning, as I recall, so she had to catch a bus.
Mrs. Boersma, the headmistress, told us that Allison drove the Mercedes to school that morning.
She was mistaken.
The murder weapon was found in Franklin's locker. Perhaps you can tell the court where it came from.
I have no idea where it came from. Well, it was obviously planted there by the murderer.
Mr. Bedford, Franklin has already confessed to taking that gun from your safe.
Yes, well, all right, but not to pulling the trigger. I'm telling you, he was framed. Franklin was framed. What's that?
Your Honor, my client has some information to impart privately.
Are you requesting a recess?
I think I'm requesting a continuance.
Yes, Franklin Bedford was here that morning. He signed in at 5:48, and the nurse processed his paperwork at 6:40.
Are you sure it was May 5th? This is very important, Dr. Markovich.
Quite sure. Tissue samples arrived at the DNA lab at 10 a.m. on the same day. Results haven't come back yet.
DNA lab? Can you tell me the nature of the test?
Franklin hasn't said?
No.
Then I'm afraid I have to invoke doctor-patient privilege.
Okay, out with it.
Huh?
You were willing to risk going to jail rather than admit you were at the clinic on the morning of the murder.
So? The alibi checked out. As far as you're concerned, that's where the matter ends.
The matter ends when my curiosity is satisfied. Why did you visit the clinic on May 5th?
They think I might have AIDS.
Nice try. Your tissues were sent to a DNA lab. They don't test for AIDS by analyzing your DNA.
All right, it's not AIDS. It's a genetic disease. I don't remember what it's called.
If it's a genetic disease, then your dad's at risk. Let's call him right now.
Wait. I went in for a paternity test. I brought them a tissue sample from Allison's baby to find out if Harrison's really the father.
If not Harrison, then who?
Tag.
Tag?
I ran into him the Sunday before he died, when I was out pushing Brendan in his stroller. He started talking smack, acted like he was gonna mess with the baby. I told him to get back, and he was like, doesn't a father have rights anymore?
That's it.
Well, you know, it made me start to wonder.
Let me get this straight. Based on one smartass comment from Tag, you made arrangements to get a paternity test, then risked a murder conviction to keep it a secret? You took him that seriously?
Yeah, I took him seriously. Tag wasn't the kind of guy to tell lies for no reason.
You told Detective Briscoe and Curtis that Tag told nothing but lies.
Yeah, but...
And you've been telling nothing but lies in this interview. Why didn't you tell the truth?
I wanted to protect Allison. She doesn't know about it.
She doesn't know. What do you mean she doesn't know?
I can't explain.
Is the paternity test a lie as well?
No, look, I didn't believe Tag at first. Like you said, the dude was a liar, and I knew Allison couldn't stand him. But he kept needling me about it, telling me that Harrison knew all about him and Allison, and then, a couple days later, this came in the mail.
Enjoy the show. Everybody else has. I haven't seen my share of the box office, but that's about to change. Tag.
Don't say anything to my dad, okay? He might take it bad, and Allison, she's part of the family now, her and Brendan. I just don't want to be the one who spoils it.
Okay, boys and girls, here she is in all her glory. Allison Conway, Harrison Bedford's little Brooklyn bitch. Poor girl can't hold her Jack and Coke.
This must have been shot at that party last spring.
That's right. Allison told us she passed out that night, and there's the evidence. I assume our narrator is Tag.
Miss Allison here is attempting to sleep her way into high society, literally. Too bad she never learned the rule. You can't rise without the Vanderhook blessing.
I think I know where this is going.
So just to prove what a big-hearted guy I am, I'm gonna give it to her anyway. Watch closely, Harrison, buddy.
And it goes on from there.
I can understand why Franklin didn't want this to get out. Allison is like a sister to him.
But what does this do for our case? If Franklin didn't do it...
Then somebody framed him. Someone who had access to the weight room and Franklin's locker.
Could be Allison herself, if she knows about the video.
I think we need to have another talk with her. Should we tell her everything up front?
We got no choice. Paternity of her child is in question. If she doesn't know that, she needs to.
Come on, Ray, she's just a kid. Her world has already been blown apart once. Last thing she needs right now is news like this. Why not wait until the test results are in? If Harrison's the father, she never needs to learn about the video.
Is this about Tag's murder? I've told you everything I know.
We need you to think back further, to last year, just before Harrison was killed, but after that party where you first met Tag.
Did you notice anything different about Harrison after that? Something to do with his attitude towards Tag?
If there's something you haven't told us, for whatever reason.
You must be talking about the attack.
What attack?
Somebody ambushed Tag, split his face wide open. They never told us who did it, but the rumor was it was Harrison. I didn't know whether to believe it. I mean, I knew he was pissed at Tag for insulting me, but he wasn't the type to go postal like that.
When you say they never told you who attacked Tag, what do you mean? Who's they?
Mrs. Boersma and the secretaries. They heard the screams and ran out into the hall.
Wait, you're saying the fight happened at New Amsterdam?
If this is true, why didn't Mrs. Boersma say anything?
Beats me. I wasn't there. I'm just telling you what the other kids have told me. Supposedly, Mrs. Boersma hauled Harrison into her office, but it's not like he got expelled or anything. And then, a week after that, he was dead.
Why did nobody tell us this when we were investigating Harrison's murder? If what you're saying is true, then Tag had a motive.
Tag was already gone when Harrison was killed.
Gone? Gone where?
His mom pulled him out of school and sent him off to California to recuperate. They say she was furious with New Amsterdam, swore that the Vanderhooks were done with it.
But then she turned around and donated a gym to the school that summer.
And Tag was back in the fall, like nothing was wrong.
Something's wrong with this picture. Thanks for being forthcoming, Allison.
Sorry I didn't say anything before. I guess I didn't want you to think bad about Harrison. He was a gentleman.
I'm sure he was.
furious at New Amsterdam? Of course I was furious. My son was savagely beaten in their halls. His face had to be sewn back together.
And yet you made a huge bequest just 3 weeks later. It doesn't square up. Why the change of heart?
Tag convinced me to do it. Despite what had happened, he was devoted to the school. He told me it was the one place in all the world where he felt truly accepted.
You told the police that Tag and New Amsterdam were like oil and water.
Did I? How odd.
It's time you told us the truth, Mrs. Vanderhook.
You're good. I like you. Yes, if you must know, the bequest was extorted from me. My reputation is the basis of my fortune, Miss Carmichael. Unfortunately, that makes me uniquely vulnerable to scandal. Somebody saw an opening and seized it. I would have been more forthcoming if I thought this had anything to do with my son's murder.
But Tag did figure in this scheme, didn't he? We've seen the video.
You have? That's not exactly the sort of thing that makes a mother proud. But then making Mother proud was never very high on Tag's to-do list.
What we want to know is, who else knew about it? Who was extorting you?
But surely you've already guessed. Our beloved headmistress, Karen Boersma. Though how she got a hold of the video I'll never know.
She hauled Harrison into her office right after the fight. She must have forced it out of him then. It would explain why she didn't expel him.
However she got it, she understood immediately what it could do to my reputation. The son of Trisha Vanderhook? Forcing himself on some inebriated little tramp? On camera yet? The press would fight to get their claws on the footage. The price was steep, but it wasn't too much to pay for a guarantee that the video wouldn't get out. So I paid up, and that was the end of it.
Did Tag know you were being blackmailed on account of him?
No. As far as he knew, there were only 2 people in the world who knew about his little excursion into filmmaking, and one of them was dead.
Tag bragged to Franklin Bedford that the video was a box office hit.
Did he? How tacky.
He knew somebody was making money off it.
Yes, I suppose I did let the secret slip out.
Mrs. Boersma guaranteed that the video wouldn't get out? How could you be confident she wouldn't turn around and extort more money out of you next year?
I made sure she couldn't do that. In exchange for my generous donation, she gave me an insurance packet.
Meaning?
A handwritten statement of what she'd done, signed and dated. If the video gets out, so does her confession. Mutually assured destruction. Always good for keeping hostile superpowers quiet.
Do you still have this statement?
Yes, and I intend to hold on to it, unless you can prove this has something to do with Tag's murder.
When did you tell Tag about your arrangement with Mrs. Boersma?
April Fool's Day. He'd gone and wrecked his Maserati again, and he was expecting, no, demanding I should get it fixed for him. For once I put my foot down. Well, he flew into a childish rage, called me a cheapskate, started screaming about how I never did anything for him. So I let him know exactly what his shenanigans had cost me. It shut him up.
Tag made a comment about the video, that he was planning to get his share of the box office. Do you have any idea what he meant by that?
A few days before he died, Tag informed me that he no longer needed my money. He said he'd found another way to pay for the Maserati.
Did he say what that was?
I asked, but all he would say was, "A good example is the best sermon."
Extortion seems to be going around this season. I think we found your son's murderer.
Franklin Bedford
was framed. By Mrs. Boersma. She put that metal in his mouth, and she planted the gun in his locker.
But why? That little matter between her and me was resolved to our mutual satisfaction.
But not to Tag's satisfaction. He saw how his headmistress had profited off his video, and he figured turnabout was fair play. After all, you're not the only one who can be severely damaged by a scandal. Probably never realized how far she might go to avoid one.
Tag? Extort Karen Boersma? He might be reckless enough to try it, I'll grant you, but it would have been his word against hers. He had nothing to hold against her unless... Excuse me a minute, would you? The insurance policy is gone. Karen Boersma's signed confession. It's missing from the safe.
Did you make a copy of it?
No. He's the only one who could have taken it. But could he really be reckless enough to... Look who I'm talking about. Of course he could.
We can bring her to justice without it, if you'll agree to testify.
No, absolutely not. As I've explained to you, I can't afford scandal.
But what about Tag?
If trashing my reputation could bring him back, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But it wouldn't. Tag's dead, but the Vanderhook name still lives. Its power is based on perception.
Mine is based on truth, and if you won't help me expose the truth about who killed Tag, I'll find someone who can.
New Amsterdam Preparatory Academy.
Could I speak to Mrs. Boersma, please? This is Franklin Bedford. I feel kind of funny about this. I mean, she's my headmistress.
And she framed you for murder. Do you want to see her get away with it?
No way. But I don't know what to say to her.
You don't want to get her mad or scared, but you do want to let her know you're onto her game, and you want a piece of the action. Play it exactly the way Tag would have played it.
We'll cue you along. You'll be fine.
Franklin, how nice of you to call. I was so relieved when they dropped the charges against you. Of course, I never stopped believing in your innocence.
Thanks.
I'm sorry that the board voted to drop you from the class roster. Purely a business decision, you understand. I assume that's why you're calling. You want me to reinstate you?
Say yes.
Yeah, that's what I want.
I'm afraid, well, the board has a point in that with all the publicity surrounding your case, reinstating you now would be too disruptive. Perhaps we can arrange for you to continue your lessons at home until the scandal subsides.
Tell her there's another scandal she should be worried about.
There's another scandal you should be worried about.
What's that?
Tell her you know where the new gym came from.
I know where the new gym came from.
Of course, everybody does. It was a very generous gift from Trisha Vanderhook.
You've got a copy of her confession.
Nah, that gym was no gift. I've got a copy of a paper here that says it was blackmail.
What do you want from me?
Tell her you want to meet.
Let's meet and, talk things over.
Where?
The workout room. Midnight.
The workout room. Midnight tonight.
You do have a flair for the theatrical, don't you? All right. Merely out of curiosity, you understand. I'm not admitting to anything.
Mrs. Boersma.
What? What are you doing? How dare
You're
you?
under arrest for the murder of Tag Vanderhook.
You have no case against me.
Maybe not at the moment, but we will as soon as we pull the codes from this keypad lock. I'll lay you 7 to 1. The code you entered just now matches the one used on the day of the murder.
Listen, gentlemen, perhaps we can come to an arrangement. It isn't myself I'm thinking of. It's New Amsterdam Prep. A scandal would be very bad right now.
You should have thought of that before you launched your little extortion scheme.
I didn't set out to kill the boy, but he forced my hand. And anyway, he deserved it. He was a bully and a rapist and an extortionist to boot. Ending his vicious little life was a service to humanity.
Interesting defense. We'll see if the jury buys it.
Judge in the Boersma trial just passed sentence. 20 to life.
Like the man said, a good example is the best sermon.
Let's hope all our students were paying attention.
Verdict is in on the paternity test, too. Turns out Harrison was the father.
Happy endings all around at the Bedford house.
I don't know about that. We still don't have a lead on Harrison's killer. I kept hoping some new evidence would turn up at this trial, but no luck.
Maybe Tag did it after all.
If he did, he could have left us some proof before getting himself killed. I'd hate to go to my grave not knowing.
There's a lot we'll never know. Don't let it spoil your sleep.